Berserk is one of the most enduring fictional creations of all time, even though its specific medium and cultural peculiarities, plus the unadulterated violence and unfiltered sexual content, have prevented it from becoming truly mainstream. Its world, story, and characters have been captivating the minds of millions of readers for decades. All of this without ever fully revealing its hidden secrets, but laying little crumbs along the thousands of pages it's made of. As a fan myself, I have always been enthralled by theories to fill the gaps, so much so that I ended up turning my own into YouTube videos. What I've noticed though is that Sensei Kentaro Miura has played one of the greatest sleights of hand on his readers during his active years as mastermind of this sprawling dark fantasy magnum opus. Not long ago, I found myself wondering, why are there so many theories out there about the Skull Knight, Zod, Griffith, and the other Godhead members, the idea of evil and other characters, or the metaphysics of the Berserk world, and so little about who Guts truly is? Herein lies the mastery of Kentaro Miura at storytelling. He never meant for us to focus too much on who Guts is and where he comes from, but on his actions and choices. The author always framed his protagonist as a man forged by his own will and not by external forces. Miura's rejection of the traditional chosen one trope prevalent in fantasy and other genres is almost existential, and yet there is something about Guts that might have escaped the collective inquiry. I have a few theories about him I'd like to explore with you guys throughout a series of videos, beginning with this one. Most of the theories I'm about to explore in this series depend upon one fundamental assumption. Guts is connected to the Astral World. Before unpacking the theory and evaluating its plausibility, I must explain why I am quite certain about Guts' connection to the Astral World. This connection is not shown to be strong or akin to some kind of magical power. In fact, Guts has never resorted to anything beyond his will, cunning, strength, and accumulated experience in combat and warfare. This connection is tenuous at best, has been hinted at too many times and in too many ways not to take notice. Let's begin from the most superficial and visual detail. Guts has pointy ears. I know this sounds silly, but hear me out. It is not possible for Miura to have always depicted Guts with this peculiar physical feature by chance. He had extensive knowledge of medieval folklore and of fantasy literature and movies to not be aware of the association, and he knew the readers would eventually take notice. In fact, all of Guts' facial features are sharp, cornered, and pointy. His eyebrows, his mouth corners, his eyes, his hair. This is a trait that is almost unequivocally associated with the animal kingdom and, by extension, with magical beings like fairies and elves. The Fey folk inhabits the natural world and therefore exhibits some animalistic traits, with ears being the most well-known trait among them. Pointy ears have also been associated with werewolves, and I would bet Miura was suggesting this as well. The title of the manga refers to the mythical Viking warriors who became possessed by the spirit of animals and driven to combination of ecstasy and frenzy in battle, with their physical traits sometimes altered by this shamanistic practice. After all, the Beast of Darkness, aka Guts' totemic spirit, is portrayed as a wolf-like being. Someone may argue that it could be simply a way to show Guts' animalistic and instinctual side, but there are two distinct elements that lead me to believe this is not a casual element. The first one is that Puck, in particular, and Ivalera and the other higher astral beings are shown with this distinctive trait. The second one is that one of the most famous cartoon characters of all time, which Miura could not possibly have been oblivious to, looks suspiciously similar to Guts. I am talking, of course, about Disney's Peter Pan. Moving on to the second element that suggests Guts has ties with the astral world is that he can see not one but two elves. We are shown Farnese being incapable of seeing Puck, for instance, until she is possessed by the vengeful spirits that endlessly pursue the branded warrior, and after becoming secularized. It could mean that once you are exposed to something beyond the physical world and you lose religious filters, your mind and perception are primed for anything astral. But there is an argument to be made about Guts not seeing just astral beings, but being a beacon for them. By rereading the Black Swordsman arc and the end of the Golden Age arc, it's easy to suspect that he didn't simply chance upon Puck, but that other forces were at play here. Also, the little flower sprite called Chitch seems to have been drawn to Guts in a moment of need. Despite the inelegant simplicity of these relations, it's a well-established fact in the Berserk world that evil things call upon evil things. For instance, the Behelits falling into the hands of people with potential for evil, and spirits being drawn towards the brand of sacrifice. That's why this idea that good things, aka mystical beings, are drawn to other mystical beings or people with ties to the astral world makes perfect sense. And that is the reason behind another detail that, in my opinion, confirms that Guts carries some kind of astral juice. We only ever see Skull Knight appearing when one of 4 conditions is met. 1. The full moon, when the divide between the realms thins. 2. When causality converges, which has essentially the same effect. 3. In the proximity of spirit trees, as at Flora's residence and in Elfhelm. And 4. To talk to Guts. In my opinion, this strongly hints at the fact that the Knight of the Skeleton belongs to the astral world and can interact with the physical world only when the divide blurs or through an anchoring. Guts' unspecified ties are a form of anchoring. Think about it. Why did Skull Knight decide to speak to Guts the first time when he abandoned Griffith? We are never truly given an explanation for that, and I think he was not aware of Guts' existence and special astral link until he discovered who was in possession of the Crimson Ballet and started spying on Griffith. He must have sensed Guts' astral connection and understood that his special status represented an opportunity in his vengeance plan. So, due to these details seeded around almost 400 episodes, we can consider our protagonist's link to the astral world as a fact, unless new events in the story disprove it. But that only leads to a much bigger question. What is the reason for this connection? Why Guts, of all the people in Midland or in the entire yet unnamed world of Berserk? There are different possible answers to that question, and each of them leads to a different cluster of theories. I would argue that there are 2 main possibilities. Guts' special link is either intrinsic or extrinsic. Allow me to explain. Our hero can hide some kind of magical properties because of his heritage, and therefore either blood or provenance, or because of transferal. In this first video I'll explore the heritage possibility, which I consider very plausible, and the lineage theory, which has little to no direct references in the story, but that could be explosive if confirmed. A theory that is not as plausible as others, I will untangle in future videos, that could completely alter all we know about the manga and Miura's themes. To understand that, we need to go back to the moment Guts was born. That scene lasts only a couple of panels, which makes me think Miura didn't want to give away too much. In it, we see Guts being born from his mother's corpse, hanging from a huge creepy tree. Many other people on that same tree. It's easy to see that they were all sentenced to die by hanging. There is a pool of blood on the ground, and other corpses scattered around, which shows us that whoever hanged those people had to first dispatch some resistance. It feels a lot like the work of some kind of authority meting out punishment for a crime they committed, and not a simple robbery or act of war. Besides, why would there be women among them if that was a result of a battle? All of them dressed with simple clothing, not coats of armor. For some reason, I always thought there was a similarity between that scene and the one where Mosgus sentenced people to die as heretics after they attacked his convoy on the road. Something tells me the people hanging from the tree when Guts was born, could have been killed as heretics as well. What if they were a team of preachers of some sort, come to that land to spread a message contradicting the theology of the Holy See? That would probably be inconsequential to the plot, but what if they did not just preach strange beliefs, but also performed acts of magic? This is where it gets interesting. I think it is very possible that Guts' mother and her companions were mages, or at least apprentices. If they were mages, they had to be there with a specific mission, and they had to come from a place where magic was fully accepted. Skellig Island, anyone? I think one of the most plausible explanations for Guts' connection to the Astral World and mystical beings is that it came from his family's blood, and or he was infused with it by being conceived on Elfhelm. That is a very exciting possibility in my opinion, but it also opens a big can of worms, because if Guts' true parentage hails from the magical island we get to see during the Fantasia arc, it means there is also a huge possibility that it could be related to someone important. And that someone could very well be Emperor Gaiseric, aka Skull Knight. Miura has hinted at Skull Knight's astral side only by letting us know that Guts' brand doesn't react to him, and by showing us Puck's thoughts about the knight feeling elf-like. This relation has become much more overt once the good guys reached the magical island. Even though Miura never spelled it out too bluntly, we see that the Knight of the Skeleton has long-standing relations with Gaiseric, who happened to be alive at the time of Gaiseric's kingdom and has existed for 1,000 years. The tomb of the woman he loved is located on the island, and the ruler of Elfhelm, Danan, bears a striking resemblance to his dead lover. We know both his current armor and the Berserker armor that's currently in Guts' possession were crafted by a mystical being living on the island, Hanar. There is also a suggestion planted about Gaiseric coming to the island for the first time with the goal of conquering it, just like he did with all the other nations and territories, and the many armors shown around the Elfhelm episodes might belong to the army he brought to the island with him. They look in fact Viking or barbarian in style, much different from the kind of armors we've seen throughout the series. So here's what I think might have happened more than 1,000 years prior to the events of the series. Gaiseric invaded the island, but his army was defeated by the mages through their various artificial traps and minions, and by some of the astral beings with a closer affiliation to darkness. Gaiseric realized that magic was greater than martial prowess, and that it could aid him in his goal to conquer the entire world, to end all wars, and usher an era of peace. He made a pact with the mages of the island that Skellig would be forever allowed independence from his empire and kept secret in exchange for the Berserker armor. But while on the island, he and the priestess of the cherry blossoms fell in love, and she followed him to later become his wife and empress. While on the island, he also met a young Flora, who was an apprentice of the priestess. Gaiseric might have stayed on the island for 1 or 2 years before getting back to his conquest, and they had a child together that was left in the care of the mages. Now, this is a bit tricky. Time flows differently on the island than it does on the regular world. Morda and Gaiseric are humans who mastered magic, but humans nonetheless, and we know for certain that they've been around since Gaiseric's time, so at least 1,000 years. This probably works similarly for the other inhabitants, which means if Guts is a descendant of Gaiseric, it wouldn't be dozens of generations removed, but perhaps 2 or 3. Now, it's impossible to know if his lineage with Gaiseric was on his maternal or paternal side, but I strongly suspect his parents were sent to Midland and later executed as part of a plan concocted by the mages to spread the belief in magic and the spirit world, the ultimate goal of countering the machinations of the God Hand, which Gaiseric is shown to have at least partial knowledge of. As I said at the beginning of the video, there is no direct or indirect suggestion for Guts coming from Skellig Island in the manga, whereas there are so many clues to Skull Knight being Gaiseric that it is an established fact by now. So it'd be perfectly reasonable for you to reject this theory as weak at best or hogwash at worst. In fact, I said it opens a big can of worms, because if Guts indeed has Gaiseric's blood, and that is the reason for his link to the Astral Realm, it would essentially make him some kind of chosen one, and the whole theme of Berserk, ever since it began, has been self-determination versus predestination. In a previous video about the God Hand, I gave my reasons as to why I strongly believe Miura's masterpiece is, deep down, a powerful meditation about political and religious dictatorships. I won't go into details here, but I'll leave a link at the end of this video if you want to hear my thoughts on that. What matters in relation to the topics of this video is that if the hidden theme of Berserk is a condemnation of regimes, Guts embodies the solution and antithesis to regimes, which is free will. Making Guts a descendant of Gaiseric would mean diluting or partially invalidating the message so strongly advocated for until now. On the other hand, though, it seems no one, not even the Skull Knight himself, is aware of Guts' true bloodline, and everything he's achieved so far has been the result of his own struggle, with minimal help from the outside, while, opposing cosmic evil all by himself. If I were to make an educated guess, I'd say Miura had the idea of Guts being a descendant of the King of Galloping Death since the very beginning. But in the same way he felt the idea of evil episode gave away too much soon, he was also conflicted about revealing this secret. He might have been keeping his hands free for the future. After all, it has been stated in interviews by Kujimori that Kentaro Miura didn't know everything about the series from the very beginning. Like many other authors, he knew the beginning and the end of his story, plus the general strokes, so to speak, but he developed and enriched it with new characters and themes and details as he went on. As a storyteller myself, I can tell you from experience that it's always a strong temptation within a creator's mind to include the protagonist's family in a novel or a series. Our whole human society and biological wiring are based on family, so it's just natural. Matter of fact, Darth Vader wasn't going to be Luke's father at first. George Lucas decided on it only while developing The Empire Strikes Back. So if there is no direct mention of this in the manga, this whole theory is just a fun speculation, right? Well, not so fast. I saved the most mind-boggling and tastiest morsel for last. Ever since the band arrived to Skellig Island, we have been introduced to a character that has become a regular. At first, I thought it was a bit superfluous, sort of an unnecessary piece of the puzzle added simply to spice things up with another attractive lady. But has it ever occurred to you that Morda, the sexy witch who essentially acts as the scoundrel and rebel in the mages community, has a lot in common, both from a visual and behavioral standpoint, with our black swordsman? Same black as night hair, same pointy facial features, same careless and disobedient attitude. Why would Miura give so much page real estate to a new character at this point in the story, where most relations and dynamics are already established? Well, here's the bomb. I strongly suspect Morda is Guts' sister. She's not aware of their parentage, but it will be revealed in time. If you would like me to further explore this tantalizing possibility in a future video, please let me know in the comments. I would also love to hear your opinions about the key concepts expressed in this video. In the meanwhile, stay tuned for more crazy theories about Berserk on DarkSpotting. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next one.